All right, hello everyone. This is a special episode that is part of the Founder Series, an original podcast series by Behind the Human and Wisdom Ventures that explores the mental fitness practices, rituals, and sources of wisdom fueling founders who are scaling compassion and wellness. Because when minds thrive, so do innovations, teams, and businesses. We all win. Today we have Maria on the show, founder and CEO of Clayful, a company on a mission to end the youth mental health crisis. I mean, obviously, I'm super passionate, and I think anyone would be super passionate about supporting that mission. So Maria, welcome to the show and the series.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
All right. So I mentioned a bit of your work, your bio. We're going to get into more of that, of course. But before we dive into the topics, I always start these interviews on Behind the Human with the same question, and that is just to avoid job titles and whatnot. And that's just, who are you? Like, who are you today? Because I know that evolves as our years unfold.
That is a loaded question. So I'm Maria. Yes, the CEO title is one that I wear proudly. But I am a Latino woman living in the U.S. I came to the U.S. when I was 10, and I have been really passionate about solving big problems. So I would say at the core, I am a problem solver. And I do that with a lot of intentionality and care for the people experiencing those problems.
Well, this is where the engineering must come in. I saw some of your background, right, as a problem solver. Because one of the questions I did want to ask was, how does someone go from engineering and the background in that space to what I can see, at least from your LinkedIn, product growth, and then, coaching students and learning management systems right up until, what you're doing now. What was that path, or what's your story behind your journey so far?
What do you mean? That's not the typical path.
Exactly, right?
What? So when I was a kid, I really wanted to be an engineer. I was really good at math and science, and I actually wanted to be an astronaut to begin with, but eyesight wasn't good enough. So there goes that dream. Maybe one day.
Sure. There's still time.
There's course. There's still, that's like the second life,
Sure.
But I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to build airplanes and spaceships for a living. And because I was good at math and science, I started tutoring kids in math and science. So I would spend all of my after school time in high school and then in college working with middle schoolers, high schoolers on, the unit circle and F equals MA, all these things that I'm sure some of us listening to this podcast still remember fondly, some of us do not. And I look back on that time now and realize that so much of the time I spent with these students wasn't just about teaching them SOHCAHTOA and helping them ace their tests, but it was really about working through the things that were hurting them or troubling them most, right? It was the pressures they were feeling from their families or themselves to do a good job. It was the drama that was, picking up on in their friend zone, or it was really heavy stuff. Like one of my best friends whose mom died of suicide, and working through those really, really, really hard feelings and still, trying to be a teenager at the same time. So
that's
much
a
of
lot.
that.
I mean, how did you?
To hold.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how do you? Because you can hold space for others, but then, I mean, if you typically need some sort of releasing practices or something, some outlets, so that doesn't, completely deplete you as well. Did you have anything like that at that young age?
Really? I mean, I would say I always lean into music.
Okay.
Right. So like driving through my hometown with music blasting was always a way to like release emotion. But I didn't have the tools back then, right? I was, I came to the US when I was 10, and there's a lot that comes with seeing my mom leave her family, leave her world to come to, your typical immigrant story, come to the US to give me a better life. And feeling that pressure that I have to make it worth it for her, right? Because she's making
Mm.
this whole sacrifice. And I was good at school, so like that was my thing. But I was also really, confused about, wait, who do I want to be, and who are my friends, and what is my personality,
Yeah,
and
sure.
am I Colombian, am I American, right? There's all these things, and it, I would say in some ways that like pressure broke me at times, and I I was a little bit of a rebel, as my mom would say,
Okay.
and gave her a little bit of a hard time, to the point where one time she well, I don't remember. I think it was like right after Thanksgiving, and we were in high school. We would drink a lot, which is not legal apparently, um, and it became it. We got in trouble, and it was a really scary time for me and for my family, and it could have very much like ended my career in a lot of ways. And thankfully it didn't. It was, silly mistakes that you make when you're in high school. And I learned a lot from that. But most importantly, I after that was able to like get support, right? So my mom found a therapist in our town, and he was this like very nice German man who's I think like 60 years old. And he's like, Mom, what does like 6-year-old German man have in common with Maria?
Yeah,
It
good,
turns out not
fair
much.
question.
Not much, but it was a way to at least start a conversation, right? And to break through this idea that like, okay, you're independent, you have to figure this all out on your own. Maybe you don't need to do that. And maybe you can ask for help or talk to someone about the things that you're feeling and things that are going on. So that sort of kickstarted a mental health journey that's taken a long time. And I say that the things I talk about in therapy are still things that happen in middle school and high school. Hence why I want to help kids now deal with
Yeah.
those things so that they save money down the road and are healthier, of course.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, what do you think in retrospect? I mean, you're probably providing a lot of this now through Clayful, but like, what did young Maria need in those formative years? Like, what kind of tools?
I think she needed to know that it was okay to ask for help and that that's not a sign of weakness. And frankly, adult Maria kind of needs that sometimes too.
No kidding. I mean, and I'm not saying
Mhm.
adult Maria. I'm saying adult all of us.
Yep, yep. There's such a stigma still, and we want to be able to do everything on our own, and it's okay not to, right? It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to want to talk about things. It's okay to feel things. So even just giving 15-year-old Maria that permission, I think would have gone a long way. Instead of saying like, no, suck it up, you're just going to focus on school and do these things, and oh, you'll figure it out.
Mhm.
Because that, it got me through, but probably not in the healthiest way, at least not that's what my mom would say.
Yeah, fair. And how has this journey or a lot of like these insights and whatnot, how did they prepare you to become a founder? Because this, as you know,
Mhm.
that this series is very much focused on founders, just given a lot of the work that founders are doing in this world is very valuable, obviously. And the last thing we want to happen is for minds to start, shutting down and burning out and so forth. Because then all of a sudden, all these beautiful ideas, including what you're working on at Clayful, like they can't be realized. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, that's just a shame because I think a lot of the innovations out there could help a lot of people. So yeah, what I guess what's followed you through along that journey, and like what are some of the things that still come up for you that you've got you have tools now, at least hopefully, to manage some of the stresses of entrepreneurship.
I always say that every light has its shadow, right? Every weakness that you have, or any gap in your skill set, it it provides value in some other ways, right? So, right. let go of things, right? I will work at a problem until I can solve it. And that sort of determination and grit goes a really, really long way when you're trying to solve a problem as big as the one we're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
The shadow of that, of course, is you can burn out and you can tire yourself out to the point where you can't really fight that fight anymore. So I've become more intentional in trying to figure out what are those sort of early signs that that's coming, that I am getting a little bit burnt out. How do I trick my brain into knowing that, hey, yes, like this is really hard work and you can also have a little bit of fun doing it. So like I always joke that when I'm doing our accounting, I like watch a show. So my brain thinks it's having fun, even
Sure.
though we're doing accounting. But it's things like that that can really, it really is like a brain hack in some ways. And just when I know I need that rest, take it. I will not sacrifice, for example, on sleep. If I don't sleep, I am a zombie.
Yeah.
So knowing what are those things that really, really make a difference for me and prioritizing that has been, and that's taken, of course, years and years to learn, but holding myself to that and holding myself accountable to that, knowing that if I don't prioritize it and I don't set that boundary, I'm just not going to be my best self.
Yeah. So much of what we're talking about and just, what I call mental fitness, and we can just generalize like the health of our mind, usually links back to practices or intentions of checking in with ourselves. And like as you mentioned, you pay attention to the signs before you get too far down the path where then all of a sudden, burnout is inevitable. So my question though, I guess two questions. One for you, like, how do you check in with yourself, and how do we help our youth check in with themselves as well?
Mhm. I notice when I become, I call it spicy, or I'm like a little bit, my
Spicy. I
temper is a
like
little
it.
bit shorter. It's like spicy Maria's coming out. There's something off. And it's the question is like, are you tired? Are you hungry? Are you annoyed? Like, what is going on? But clearly you're dysregulated.
Yeah.
So that noticing that spice, and sometimes that spice comes with a little bit of guilt because that spiciness is directed at someone, right? So I'm like
Mhm.
short with my co-founder, or I'm short with a family member, and I'm like, okay, that I need to rein it back in and like take a deep breath and figure out what's at the root of it. So I've been trying to be more intentional about it. Not perfect at it yet, of course,
You're human.
but it takes
Shocking.
practice. Yeah, I know, right? It's practice. It's a muscle to exercise, right? And trying to not feel as guilty or be too hard on myself when I don't get it right. But trying to really, again, show up in the best way I can. And I think that applies to kids too, right? Like so much of our growing up where we're taught that like if you behave a certain way, or this is actually the best example I've heard. If you have a kid who doesn't understand math, you teach them. If they don't know how to read, you teach them. But if they don't know how to behave, you punish them.
Yeah, that's a
And
good
so
point.
many of us don't have those tools early on, how to behave, right? And how to act in a situation that we haven't been confronted with before. And instead of being taught how to behave, we're often punished. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking about that a lot, and like how do we work within our school systems to shift that mindset, knowing that of course there's frustrations when a student is misbehaving in class, right? And that teachers are also humans and administrators are also humans. So like they're entitled to have a reaction, but trying to have a little bit more empathy for, hey, that skill's just not there yet. Let's work together to build that skill. And what could be the impact of that if we shift those punishments into more restorative, whether it's skill building or empathy building exercises.
Have you experienced, like, what are some of the good use, like good stories or examples where this has worked well, where you've seen kind of that flip in perspective around punishing versus teaching, and where maybe there's still a lot of work to be done.
It goes back to this idea that our kids are in school trying to learn all these big things while still being teenagers, right? And while still being confronted with the pressures of figuring out who they are and their peer group and trying to be cool and trying to protect themselves, right? Like there's a lot of social dynamics that happen in the day-to-day of a middle school or high school, right? There's a whole genre of entertainment around it. I watch a lot of it. I call that research.
Yeah, I can imagine.
If with the things that we're trying to do within the school system is say, hey, when there's, you're trying to teach something and there's a couple of kids that are bickering in the back of the class and it's distracting for everybody else, instead of saying like, hey, you go to the office, like you're disrupting me and you need to get out of here. How do we recognize that there's something going on? They're dysregulated. Hey, it seems like something's happening here. Why don't you go on Clayful, talk to a coach about it, and then come back when you're ready? Really recognizing that this isn't a bad thing, right? We, even adults, as we're working on a day-to-day basis, like things pop up, right? And we have to react to them and then we have to move on. And it's okay to feel and to deal with those situations in the moment, and then we can move on. But if we just say, okay, you shut up, focus, they're not really going to focus, right? Because we're not giving them the chance to work through it. So that's like one example of teachers really leveraging the tool because it can be used in the classroom to help students work through whatever's going on without disrupting the rest of the class, without sending them outside, without having there be any sort of like punitive behavior surrounding it. And then once they're ready, great, they can zone back in and listen. But they're not going in, leaving the class, going to the office, getting distracted by all these other things, talking to their friends in the hallway, coming back, right? It takes exponentially more time to do that. So we're excited to see teachers do that, and kids also want to do that, right? Because they're just like, okay, yeah, this helps. Talk it out, vent, and then I can move on.
Well, and it's just, and obviously this is, I'm assuming, kind of the thesis behind your work, but it's like it's teaching and helping kids, but I mean, also teachers and adults obviously take a bit of a pause and equip them with the tools and the thought processes and maybe like mental models in the kind of in the background to handle situations. To your point, like it's okay, you're bickering, you're disrupting class, and like here's the punishment, but we all know then it happens again and again, and then they change classes, or like it's a loop that never stops until eventually there's some sort of like teaching there or learning around, okay, like this is why this is disruptive and why, like what's behind it, right? And I feel like it's like that for everything in society. We're always on the surface of everything. Like we never ask the questions to get to the core of like, well, what's like, why am I reacting like this? Or like, why are these emotions surfacing? Or well, why is my default, decision to go and reach for something unhealthy, let's say, when it comes to food choices? Like there's reasons typically, right? But we like avoid all of that stuff.
We do. And a lot of it is because a lot of us are essentially in survival mode, right? I think about our educators and how hard the last couple of years have been. And I have so much empathy and so much respect for the work that they do. And it's grueling to be doing all that work and then not feeling the respect or acknowledgement and gratitude for the important work that they're doing day in and day out. So that is taxing, right? That wears on you. So I feel for our educators, and that's part of what we're doing, right? We're really trying to say like, hey, we know that it's hard to manage a classroom when half of your kids are dysregulated, right? Because that's what the stats say, right? You say like 40% of kids are experiencing hopelessness and sadness. Do you really think they're talking about the unit circle? And it's just, they're not going to, right?
Yeah.
So, and then teachers are frustrated because kids aren't engaged, but it's because it's a Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? They're not meeting that in their emotional safety. Nothing else is going to come through.
Hmm.
So I'm excited about the work that we're doing within schools because we're really trying to shift that narrative of, hey, we need to serve this part first, right? This is a foundation of that student well-being so that you can teach them and so that they can ace that test and so that they can be the most engaged students that they want to be. But if we're not addressing the things that are essentially keeping them up at night or keeping them from focusing in classroom, then we're not going to be able to get to them.
Hmm. Yeah, you're consciously or constantly swimming upstream, essentially, or against the current. Like it's always going to be a fight. And I mean, and essentially, though, the beautiful byproduct of all of this is that, of course, if this is adopted and as it's more widely adopted, I mean, there's the in the moment, solution for learning and like behavior and skill, development and all that kind of stuff. But then there's just all of the lifelong tools now that these kids have that I, I don't know if you've quantified any of this stuff in any of your pitch decks or investor decks, but I can only imagine the amount of uh, not just financial savings, but just, well, I guess, unfortunately, we live in a very capitalistic, society. So people will listen to this stuff, but like I imagine the savings in, people with having run-ins with the law because now, they're equipped with the tools and they're making less bad decisions. Let's just say, in going against authority and all that kind of stuff. Not to mention like the mental health costs to the system and the human costs, of course, to all of that. Like it's just exponential. So powerful.
1,000%.
Yeah.
We see it in a lot of different ways, right? Anything from, hey, when a student is starting to experience suicidal ideation and we're able to intervene early on, just as they're starting to have those thoughts before an attempt is even made, before they have a plan, right? Just starting to feel those like feelings of despair. If you're able to intervene there, like think about the both emotional and financial costs of a suicide attempt.
Of course.
It's a lot. It's a lot for that person. It's a lot for their family. It's a lot for the community. Even just, hey, imagine they have to be hospitalized for a day or two.
Yeah.
That's what, $7,000 to $10,000 a night.
Yeah.
Right. And then they're not in school. So the school loses that because schools get their budget, their funding based on attendance. Their students not there that day. So they're losing funding that way. And then their friends are like, how did I not notice this? Why didn't I do anything about it? They're disengaged, right? So there's all these ripple effects. Their parents might have to not go to work because they have to take care of the student. And that's another thing. So there's all these implications, financial and emotional, that we can, by taking a more preventative approach, prevent.
Totally.
And
totally.
that is, life-changing in so many ways.
So what have the conversations been like with students? Like how, because we all know, even us as adults, like there are so many things vying for our attention. And I'd say with kids, it's even more so. Like how have you been able to, I guess, make them care that this is important and that there's a tool here and it's, I guess helping them feel that it's okay. Like it's okay to use the platform.
Transparently, that's our biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Because we're at this intersection where it's not a crisis line, right? It's not, we're not trying to be there just when you're at a breaking point, but way, way before that, right? So when you're going through that breakup, when you're stressed out about that test tomorrow, when you're about to head into the gym for that basketball game and you're freaking out because it's your semifinals and the team's counting on you, right? Like all of these real, very real things, that's when we're there. And our job is to teach kids that, hey, when you feel that thing, come talk to us. Just like the same way when you're like, when you're hungry, and you don't have any food, you're like, okay, I'm going to go to Uber Eats. It's like the same. We're trying to make that same connection, and that's hard. That's hard to do. So we really lean into use cases a lot, right? So like this is when, like giving kids examples of like, this is when you might use Clayful. Here's exactly basically the examples I just gave you.
Yeah.
And making it feel so normal, right? This is, everyone has a bad day. Like everyone goes through these things, and we're working against the stigma. So really making it feel like, oh, it's just like so not a big deal. It's just an app. Like you just have to log in and start talking to someone. It's super, super easy.
Yeah.
And having that nonchalant messaging really resonates, because think about the alternatives. Like, oh, you have to go see a therapist, and sometimes that requires all these forms for insurance and all these questions about your background, and it feels so much heavier. Whereas it's just like, oh, I just want to talk. You can talk for 5 minutes, you can talk for 20, you can talk for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And everyone's getting access to this. This isn't just for you because you're broken. It's for everybody because everyone can use the support. So it's all these little things that we do to make it feel normal, and really to normalize and destigmatize that everyone needs support. And that's totally normal.
It's interesting. Like, as you're sharing this, I can't help but think, because I primarily work with teams on the corporate side of things to introduce mental fitness, and I've essentially found the same thing that you're describing. That where I've been most successful with teams is going in and using use cases like, okay, you're about to present your brand strategy for, $2 million of budget. How do we go in with a clear and focused and primed mind and without doubt, and you showing up confidently, or you're about to deliver a big presentation in front of the sales team, or you're about to go see a customer, like whatever, but just getting them into the frame of mind, or into a situation where like, oh yeah, I have to do those things. But ultimately, and I think you'll probably agree with this, that's just the narrative on the surface. Like really, because of that, like that's the entry point. But now we're equipping them with the tools to handle really anything, right? And it's not, at least on my side, I don't even use the words mental health. It's always something related to fitness. Like you're empowered to do this, just like physical fitness. Yeah, I can take a walk, or if you want to go a little harder, you can take a run. But there's something that any of us can do to train our bodies, and it's, I really do believe it's the same thing when it comes to our minds.
The word fitness is such an interesting one. I might try that. We talk about coaching, right? And a lot about our focus is on coaching, not therapy, not counseling. Just like everyone needs a coach. Like you have your football coach, you have your vocal coach, you have all these different coaches that help you be your best self. LeBron James has 16 coaches. The better you are, the more coaches you have.
Totally.
So how do we really lean into that, I would say, as another layer of destigmatization, both for kids, but also for families, right? It feels really heavy for a family member to say like, oh, my kid needs therapy.
Yeah.
But when you say, oh, my kid has a coach, like that's a value proposition, right? There's value there. It's not. So I think there's something really fascinating there. And you're right, it becomes an entry point, right? And some of the conversations we have are about, hey, I'm procrastinating a lot and I want to know how to be my best self or not do that. And then there's some that are like, hey, I'm really struggling and I need help. And then we can be that sort of early warning system for the schools. But our goal is to really focus on this preventative work so that kids get those skills and take that into the rest of their lives. Yeah.
So what are some of the, like, what are outside of going back and forth, speaking with a coach on the platform, for everyone listening, if you head over to Clayful, the website, I'll put the link in the show notes, but like you'll see screenshots of what this looks like and so forth, and you can download the app and whatnot. But I'm curious to see, are there any, like, what are some of the most used or suggested practices or rituals outside of, again, conversing, but like, hey, why don't you try this? Like, have you tried breathing or whatever those things are, just to give, just people some examples in the space. But then, of course, we're all just unique human beings. So I'm a believer that, oh, okay, well, maybe I can integrate what, Maria just suggested and try that out of my own routine, or when I'm faced with tough scenarios or stressful scenarios, or even better, more consistent preventative, setups.
So we definitely do a lot of breathing for sure. My personal favorite is the box breathing.
Yeah.
Once I heard that's what the Navy SEALs use, and I'm like, great, I should be a Navy SEAL. That's gonna be for me. So funny to think how it helps to know, where that came from. So yeah, lots of breathing, lots of grounding techniques. I would say the most popular are there's two visuals, and I can share them with you too to put in the show notes if you want. One that's what do you feel like? It's a feelings wheel,
Oh,
and
okay.
because a lot of kids come in and they're like, I'm upset or I'm anxious. I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. Like, let's look at this and tell us, like, what are all the emotions that are coming out? And the process of articulating those emotions and being like, oh, actually, am I anxious or am I nervous and excited? And how do we just differentiate between some of these very extreme, like, am I depressed or am I just sad and disappointed?
Yeah,
And
that's
knowing the
interesting.
difference between those is super interesting, both again for kids and for adults.
Yeah.
And then the parallel one to that is, what do you need? So there's a similar visual, just like, what are all the different types of needs? And there's, physical needs, like, I want a hug, or I'm looking for connection. I want to feel understood, and really helping kids articulate, okay, you're feeling upset with this person. What do you think you need right now? And then we have a whole protocol for asking for what you need. So
Love
all
it.
of those come together into this very powerful, relationship building process with peers or with family members, even with teachers, right? When they're like stressed about a test and feel like they need more support. But it's the process of helping you again identify what is it that you're feeling, right? So having that retrospective internal reflection, what is it that you need, and then how to communicate that in a way that inspires connection versus is like, a angry or destructive conversation.
So powerful. What's so beautiful about what you're sharing? I mean, I know we're speaking about all of this for the most part from the angle of kids and our youth, but like this is applicable. Even the visuals, the wheels, the asking questions like, "What do you need?" I mean, whether you're a parent, a teacher, leading a team, on a team, like, it really doesn't matter, because we're all humans with all of these emotions. So everything that we're talking about is applicable right across the board, and it's so accessible.
Mhm.
It's amazing.
That's the power of this work, right? That everything we do, like, oh, that's a really good tool. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
And even on our coaches' lives too, right? Like we share these tools with our coaches, and they talk about how they're better family members, better partners, better friends, because they now have these tools that they, one, leverage themselves, and also leverage within their own communities. So it becomes this pretty incredible ripple effect across communities of coaches, or even across our own team members, that because we're teaching these tools, we now get to use these tools.
Hmm.
So it's pretty powerful to witness.
Yeah, it is pretty. I mean, that is one of the, at least for me, one of the biggest joys of working in this space, is that just by default, you obviously get the benefits of the work, and of course, seeing others thrive as well, and being able to share and actually implement this stuff in your own life. I mean, it's something at least I'm quite grateful for, because I know that there's, there are a lot of people that don't have that I guess you can say work perk, where, you legitimately feel better because of the stuff that you're teaching and putting out there, because of just by the very nature of the work. It's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, we put them actually on our Instagram and our LinkedIn.
I love it.
My friends would comment on it and be like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna get this. I'm
Yeah.
saving this for later." And you see that in the metrics too. So if anyone's looking for tools, they'll follow us on social, because we'll publish all of them there, and it's so applicable. I think that's the beauty of so much of this work, right? That it's just as applicable if you're 5, if you're 50, because it's basic stuff that we don't necessarily get taught how to do.
No, but controls everything in our life. It's crazy.
Nathan.
Right. So as just to kind of round it or start closing things off or wrapping up the conversation, because we're getting close to time. As a founder, what are some of your learnings or lessons or a message that you would love to just share with other founders that, might be struggling or might be, in that obviously fast-paced build a business kind of environment that most of us find ourselves when we say, hey, we have this idea and now you've got to bring it to the world, which is probably even harder than jumping on a spacecraft and going to the moon. So you picked something even harder than your original dream. So any words of advice, just given the space that you work in, that at least has worked well for you in these stages of building businesses?
The thing that comes to mind is one that I struggled with a lot initially, is this idea of what does building a startup in mental health mean? And how can you be true to the mission and authentic to the mission, while also acknowledging that building a startup is hard, right?
Yeah.
Mental health and startup are a little bit of an oxymoron in a lot of ways, right? You see
Very
the
much.
depression rates among founders and the burnout rates among founders. And it's not a job that's for everybody, right? Being at a startup. So I have been really, as a team, we've been more intentional in defining, okay, what are our values and how do we ensure that we're bringing on amazing humans who are not just extremely passionate about the mission, because of course the mission drives everything we do, but also that they're equally as excited about building a business.
Yeah.
And one of my good friends and our investors, she said, you're doing extraordinary work and you need extraordinary people to do extraordinary work. So this isn't, and I'm very transparent. I'm like, this isn't a 9 to 5. This is the kind of thing that you're going to be thinking about when you're in the shower. And that's expected. That will be the thing. And you're the right person for this team, if that like excites you and like that energizes you, versus takes away from your mental health. If that's not, if you feel the need to draw a boundary and, clock out at 5, this isn't for you. And that's okay, right? There's a lot of other great places that are. But I've had to be more transparent and clear about that. And frankly, like wrestle with that tension myself, because I don't want to be inauthentic to the mission. But at the same time, like we're building a startup in a very hard space, and it's solving arguably the biggest problem that our society's facing.
Yeah.
It was easy. It would have already been done.
Totally. But it's fine. Yeah, I think it's finding that balance though of kind of goes back to that classic airline message we all hear, right? You have to put your oxygen mask on first before helping others, because if you and the team burn out, then there is no Clayfuls, and then all of a sudden the ripple effect of what you're putting out there is gone. So it's tough, and I mean I've been in that exact space, so I totally empathize. But I think what you shared along the conversation we've had is, it's the check-ins. It's having some of those like foundational practices and the tools that you can lean on, because it's a roller coaster. It's going to be up and down, and just like you mentioned, like with the LeBron James example, with all the coaches, equally there's recovery practices and principles. It's like you're going all in at certain periods, but we still need those recovery moments and whatnot. And I think we're all a little bit different, but it's just as long as we prioritize some sort of a healthy balance, then we're able to sustain that level of output and performance, right?
Yeah, and know yourself, right? Like,
Yeah.
if that's what fuels you, lean into what fuels you.
Yeah.
But if LeBron James hates basketball, like, he probably shouldn't play basketball.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. Good point. Maria, this was fun. I mean, we could definitely jam for a lot longer, but I want to respect our time. And I just, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing a bit of your story and the work that you and the team are putting out into this world. It's so needed. It's so important. And, I thank you for the decisions that you've made across your journey to land here, because again, I mean, the impact of the work goes across generations and many, many, many years. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I appreciate getting a chance to tell a story and hopefully inspire many others to come on this journey with us. There's a lot of mental health challenges to address. So come on over. The water's warm.
I love it.